This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Zipporah Jarmon, and we're going to talk about resources for BIPOC and queer people, and we'll talk about your story.
Yeah,
Welcome to the Fam Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing today?
I'm so good. Thank you for having me on your show today.
Well, it's always great to talk to a lot of people from around the world. That's what we like to do.
Mhm.
And we've got your URL there, www.withinmecoaching.com. For those of
Mhm.
you on the show listening, you could check that out while we're talking, and it will be clickable so people will be able to get into that. In addition, we like to ask every guest on the show a couple questions before we get to the heart of your story. What motivates you, and why do you do what you do?
Wow, what motivates me? For me, it's queer people, it's Black people, it's our lived experience. I am someone who realized really early on that I love to see us thrive, and that I also realized that a lot of people with power don't often think about Black folks, people of color, queer folks, and that like we just have to make things for ourselves, for our communities. And once I started to realize how motivated I am by my community and people have shared experiences, that has really became the kind of the heartbeat of the work that I do.
Well, I think it's important because I'm a creative person, and creativity tends to come from all kinds of places. It comes from people with neurodiversity, people with a lot of diversity. Other than that, and
Mhm.
we're kind of living in a backlash state.
But yes.
Like I'm a child of the '70s,
Hmm.
so I thought we had things worked out.
Yeah.
And now we've got like some folks that want to don't seem to have learned the lessons of the '40s.
Wow. That's so true. Yeah.
And it's really striking that to me. I'm in tech. I like in
Mhm.
my day job, I'm in tech, and
Mhm.
I am so amazed by the lack of diversity,
Yeah.
and then the mindset in a world that's like I spent a lot of time trying to get to, like, pure logic, kind
Yeah.
of like watching Spock on Star Trek, right?
Mhm.
And the idea that logic would be illogical to do. It's kind of like when you watch Star Trek, you see Gene Roddenberry used to make statements through
Mhm.
Star Trek talking about like racism by using Spock as like
Yeah.
a step in, right?
Mhm.
And people were talking about his green blood and saying all kinds of things. And
Yeah.
the science fiction was like that. Rod Serling did
Yeah.
things like the monsters on Maple Street. He used to
Mhm.
interject morality with science fiction.
Yeah, I mean, that makes me think of X-Men. So
Yeah,
I'm a
same thing.
90s baby, so I grew up on X-Men and,
Yeah,
Professor being MLK, and then his rival, I can't think of his name, supposing to be like Malcolm X,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And there being that ingrained storyline in there of like, yes, we love these figures and they're representing something deeper. It's
yeah.
something that is a reflection of our past and our present, and ideally the hope of where we want to go, which is um, not only equality but equity.
Yeah, yeah,
And
that's hard now.
yeah,
So
yeah,
we got people that the it's kind of like the robber baron story of the past. Like if
yeah,
you don't know your history, you repeat it.
yeah,
But robber
absolutely.
barons were kind of this thing, right? And this idea, and I'll dump in another idea like Calvinism, right? There's this idea
Mm-hmm.
that if you were rich, you were closer to God, and anything you decided was like the law.
Mm-hmm.
And we see this kind of oligarchy, and it's not just in our country. It's like an infection going
Yeah,
worldwide,
yeah.
where people just because they have wealth are making decisions top down
Mm-hmm.
and making decisions and making, this feeling that anybody that's diverse is a threat, right? Anybody that has a different opinion, it's not approved.
Yeah, yeah.
and they must be hard for young people today because like I grew up in the '70s and my father was like getting the benefit of affirmative action when
Mm-hmm.
we lived in Boston, and he was, he came out of National Guard, was an officer, got into an insurance company, got to be a manager
Mm-hmm.
because in the '70s there's this idea, well, maybe we should give these people a shot,
Yeah,
but the whole time it was hard.
yeah.
The
I
whole
mean,
time it was like we lived in a white suburb, and people didn't like us. You know,
Mm-hmm.
if we were trying to move on up, and we got resistance. We got people sending something taking for sale signs and throwing them through our car windshield. People telling us like go home, go
Mm-hmm.
back to Africa, all kinds of stuff. It's like and like everything's full circle. Like everything we went through is like why we have to do this again.
Yeah. It continues to come back. I think something that has been a conversation between like just some friends and close people in my life is just that one, this does not have to be that hard. It really doesn't, right? If we're just
Yeah,
thinking about everyone getting their basic needs, everyone leading with empathy and softness, and what that could do, right? Like it could just be that.
yeah,
Um,
it could be like it's people talk about it economics, right? If you go into economics, and I saw some studies saying anti-diversity and racism actually affects GDP.
yeah,
They actually look at if you aren't inclusive, you actually reduce GDP. But
yeah,
the mindset is that diversity reduces GDP, but it's not factual.
yeah,
It's like when people do the numbers, it doesn't match the rhetoric.
yeah,
So it's really disappointing that now today in the corporate world, like all the DEI or DEIA programs, they're kind of a bullying. It's like
mm-hmm,
are being reduced, and it wasn't a massive mandate.
mm-hmm.
We're not talking
It
about
wasn't
70% mandate that
correct.
suddenly like so if you're a corporate citizen, you didn't even have a massive mandate and you just threw it out.
Yep.
So what did that tell you?
Yes, right. That speaks volumes because again, it wasn't mandatory. I think especially as we think about places that's not funded by the government, right? To corporations,
Yeah,
right? I'm seeing things, of course, around like gender affirming care for young people.
yeah,
That's a mandatory request, not request, but mandatory rule that's being passed down. So like hospitals are removing it because it's mandatory, it's government. But the private companies, corporations who's doing it, that also just shows that they never really
yeah.
wanted
'Cause why?
to.
Yeah, if you're not getting federal money, you don't have to do
Mhm,
that, right?
exactly.
So the thing is, it's like a bullying. It's like you're seeing the bullies. Like I grew up with the bullies in high school
Hmm.
running things, right? And even in college, you got the frat boys running things.
Yeah.
And it was very destructive. I saw a lot of women being pushed down by frat boys. I
Yeah.
saw I saw people in like special clubs not allowing people to do stuff.
Hmm.
And I'm like, back when I was in school, we were fighting for Nelson Mandela on
Yeah.
campus. I'm a child of the 70s, and I was going to school like in the 80s,
Hmm.
late 80s, class of 1999, 1990. And it was like, we were being told that Nelson Mandela was a communist.
Yeah.
The Nelson Mandela was a threat, right?
Well,
It
mhm.
was like, and he's won the Nobel Peace Prize. So, like, what's the mindset?
Yeah, right. I was listening to something the other day. I don't recall what it was, but they had talked about that like when when people put BIPOC, black, indigenous people of color in roles of power, and how that's scary
It's scary.
for
Yeah,
folks, right? Like educated. Oh, this was what it was. It was like they tried to keep black people from learning how to read, right? From
yeah,
gaining access because there was a fear of what we could do with it.
yeah. If we do, even today, it's like, what are they doing now? They're trying to defund
Fun
the black
HBCUs,
colleges,
yeah,
like the HBUs.
which is what we got because we couldn't go to other universities, right?
Yeah,
Um,
we tend to do very well in those. Like, if you
mhm,
check, right, and you look, and it's kind of a statement about society. You see the graduates coming out of the HBUs, right?
mm,
And the chances that they're going to be an entrepreneur, the
yeah,
chances that they're actually going to move up,
yes,
they're going to be in the C-suite
yeah,
compared to the guys who go to the Harvards and stuff,
hmm,
right? Or the other, like it actually there's more people getting into the power structure
hmm,
from those. which is
Yeah.
a statement about the equality of our society.
Yeah.
Even when you go to the other school, you still don't get the
Exactly.
the connection because sometimes you got to build it. Like in Atlanta, you got to,
Mm-hmm.
or if you're in the South, it's like if you're in a community of color and you have a better shot, you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Yeah.
of building a business, actually getting customers and actually doing it.
Yeah. I mean, I think what it makes me think of is like if people wanted to, if corporations wanted to, they would, right?
Yeah,
Um,
there's just
because for as long as commercials or advertisements been a thing, like the target audience have often always been cisgender, straight, white people.
hmm
And that's what we're so used to, right? I as a kid, I remember looking at TV and trying to find, a character or a storyline that
it was like you.
aligns
It
with
was like aligned with you.
exact right, or just seeing someone I could grow up and be. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? And
yeah.
that was not on
They're trying
TV
to
at
put you in the
all.
box. The problem with society is we have this tendency that we talk about the individual. There seems to be a lot of preset boxes
Mm-hmm.
that people are kind of forced to fall into
Yeah.
because it's like this whole dynamic, the social dynamic. I was a sociology major, and
Love social.
there's this tendency, like nobody wants to be affected by Ann or me. Nobody wants to be the outsider.
Yeah.
People have a need for safety,
Yeah.
and then there's fear, and then there's
Mhm.
shame. And
Yeah.
then people try to create a standard. Society will create these archetypes that
Mm-hmm.
tend to be outside of like the bell curve.
Yes,
When you get
absolutely.
into the bell curve, it's really the creative people, the diverse people, the
Yes.
neurodivergents. They're on the outer edges, and everybody in business says they want those people. But
Mm-hmm.
when you get into business, I've been in corporate America. I've been working for like since I'm 57,
Mm-hmm.
and I had all these people telling me they wanted me.
Yeah.
They didn't really want me
No.
because when I actually spoke up my mind, they didn't like it.
Yeah.
So I
And
ended up having to work independent as a consultant, and now I found like a startup that aligned to my beliefs, right? So I found a company I could align with. It took me a long time. It's 25 years
yeah,
to get to
because
a
it's
place.
nice to.
Yeah, and it's like in the industry, like I don't see a lot of people like me. Like usually, if I see people like me, they're from Africa, they're
Mm-hmm.
from the Middle East,
Mm-hmm.
they're from somewhere
We're
else.
not Black Americans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like and it's really like that's the statement right there.
Yeah. I mean, even to your point earlier, of speaking about how like we as humans unconsciously we want to group people and put people in boxes, and like hearing you kind of reflect on how then we make up all these arbitrary values or systems and things like that. I like to remind one people in general because I'm also a creative, and also my clients is like, hey, everything is made up. Like this, all this
It's all
stuff is
been
made
oh,
up.
it's all made up.
Someone just thought it, and other people was like, yes. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I think that one that can be really empowering for people of minority experiences to just be like, oh, money is made up. The way that we live life, the way these boxes and systems, and not that they're all bad, right? Like, again, we as humans want to group things together. And also, these groups and these ideas don't have to be law, right? We
No,
can
no.
color outside the
Boxes, yeah.
line,
The
right?
problem is people. The problem I have. You can have your belief system.
Mm-hmm.
You can have your freedom of speech, but my problem is when somebody feels their freedom of speech is to deny somebody else
Mm-hmm.
freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we have a situation today. We've got people who believe their belief system is that if I exist, it's a threat.
Yeah.
So if somebody speaks a different point of view, it's a threat to
Mm-hmm.
their freedom. And their idea of freedom is to suppress the freedom of the other person.
Yeah. I
That's
mean,
like this oxymoron. So what does that? How does that make sense? But that's the age we're living in. It's like if you point out BIPOC, suddenly people's face will turn. They'll be grimace. They get
mhm,
upset. they don't want to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
They immediately think you're not qualified, you don't have a valid point of view,
Mm-hmm.
and anything you say, there's no listening. Like the ears turn off.
Yeah.
So like, well, I'm supposed to disbelieve.
Yeah.
You're kind of like, there's like Darwinism. There's,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
people don't remember that. It's like, what does that mean? But social Darwinism is like racist. Like, it's like this idea in science that you could believe that other indigenous peoples, like other people, tend to be darker skinned people, are
Mm-hmm.
inferior
Mm-hmm.
by science.
Yeah.
And it's kind of ingrained in our constitution. It's like it says we're 3/5 of a human, and nobody got rid of it.
Yeah. I mean, what I was going to mention was that, like, we sit here today and we're discussing what's happening today and how it's so reminiscent of the past. And then we get to, I don't know, let's say 60 years ago. And then we're like, that's still reminiscent of the past. Okay, let's get to 1900s. This country is founded upon these ideas and these systems and this anti-blackness, anti anything that's not pure white, right?
Yeah.
This purity idea, right? And so we always want to move forward. We always have hope. And, part of just looking back is realizing what's the foundation of the country as we know it, the United States of America.
Yeah.
What was that founded on? Because before,
Yeah. That's why they don't like critical race theory. That's why they don't like
those
it.
things, right? Like addressing the foundation, because we can make a pretty house, but if it's on unstable land or if it's on,
Well, and the problem is, like, when you get to the founders and you want to put them on Mount Rushmore, you want to act like they're Greek gods, and that's fine. That's what you want to do. But when they actually had slaves,
yeah,
so then they're talking about the Declaration of Independence. They're talking about these big ideas. And I
mm-hmm.
read de Tocqueville, and I was a dual major. I was a political science major and sociology major. I read like de Tocqueville. I read the Federalist Papers. I read the Constitution. I read all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I understand it. I read about the structure of Greece and the Roman Empire, and looking at Eritrea, looking at all these different empires.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but the fact is like they don't want to tell the truth.
Yeah.
Like when you don't tell the full story,
Mm-hmm.
right? When you don't reveal that the North, right, that insurance companies had policies on slaves like they were a tractor.
Banks
Yeah.
too.
You don't tell the truth because, like, that's not a lie. You can go find it. You can go look in a repository if you look for it and find the documents.
Yeah, absolutely.
You just don't like it if I actually show you the document.
Exactly. Something that I think about, especially around this time, is like, we as people who don't have the power that other people and entities, systems have, or what's the word? But just like different people or corporations have, like, what would we do with power? What would I do with power? Right?
Yeah.
And I know my answer. Though we look at, people like our current president and that administration, and you see what they do with power, right? I do like to, in theory, be of the mind that everyone is not who they are at the end of their story, right? We didn't start off this way. And what does power do? And who do you become? What do you do with power when you have it? And I feel like that's a huge, almost divider. It's like you see, like, the power I have as, a Black person from Chicago, a queer person who do a lot of things in my community. The power I have, the people who look up to me, I put it back into my community.
Yeah, you want to pay it forward, right?
I do, right?
If you there's like the mentor, the sensei, the teacher,
Yeah.
right? The like, I'm a producer. I like to I'm a teacher. Like, if you're basically a producer, music producer, you work with a young person, you try to bring out the best of who they are.
Because I've
Like,
also been poured into, right? I have
yeah,
my mentor who is maybe 7 years older than me, amazing person, also entrepreneur. But I have people who's under me, who's growing, right? And so it's it's the pouring in. I think going back to my point earlier, just that like it doesn't take a lot to be a good person. It
No,
doesn't take a lot
it's
to
just
be
empathy, right?
empathy, right? And so it's like, of course, I'm going to pour into my communities, people with similar experiences as myself. And if I see someone who's struggling, who don't have the experiences that I have, that doesn't mean that I'm going to look past them and keep going. I'm
Well,
a
you lift up
human.
every boat. You're like it's a different kind of idea. Like it is the idea of that I got to get to the top of a hill and like step on people to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Versus I want to raise up all everybody.
Yeah,
Right. So
because it's stronger.
when you have the mindset, like if you have an FDR mindset
Yeah.
versus a Herbert Hoover mindset,
Mm-hmm.
you can see it in American history. Right. And it's been the big argument.
Mm-hmm.
FDR saw the Great Depression and he lifted the poor person and gave him a job in the WPA.
Mm-hmm.
Right, saw work that needed to get done, need to have dams built, need to have aqueducts built. Instead of having people just starve to death,
Mm-hmm.
decided he would help people. Decided
Yeah.
he would create like a system to like basic social security, so people wouldn't end up having nothing when they were old.
Mm-hmm.
That it wasn't just to
Yeah.
just let the rich be rich and let the poor be poor. There
Mm-hmm.
was an idea. And
Yeah.
there's been this dynamic that's like, oh, that's wrong because you should just let people fall on their face.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, like
Right.
really, like it's the same people who go to a church. Did Jesus say you should just fall on your face?
Mm. Did not.
Really? Did he really mean that you should hate your neighbor?
Mm-hmm.
And you
Mm-hmm.
see the confluence of people, some people having this idea there's a vengeful God or something.
Mm.
Instead of a God that wants to like lift every boat. Like where'd that come from?
Yeah. And I think like to your point of like not stepping on people, we're stronger together. And it's such a generic thing to say, but it's not incorrect. I'm definitely someone of the mind of, so I grew up playing basketball. I love playing it. I of course, like I said, I'm from Chicago, so I grew up in the era of the 90 Bulls. And just kind of growing up and being like, okay, there's no I in team. It's so kind of cheesy to say. And like I have just in my career been able to look and say, oh, my community need this. My community don't even know that we need this.
Yeah.
Let's try to figure out a way to give my community this, because then we're stronger, right? We can move together as a unit. And even if we have varying ideas of what we should do, how we should do, we are having a conversation that something needs to happen. Something
Yeah.
needs to change. We we can't dismantle a system. We can't change a system. We can't anything without working together and having diverse ideas
Well,
and
building instead of dividing.
exactly.
There's the idea like people like to divide and conquer. I mean, it's like you read the Art of War, right?
Mm,
There's an idea to divide and conquer or to build.
mm-hmm.
People have chosen to go with the divide and conquer
Yeah.
because they're going for short term gain.
Yeah.
They're saying,
Yes.
oh, the price of eggs, it's okay for the divide and conquer because it's going to reduce my price of eggs.
Yeah.
Very short sighted.
Yeah.
There's no, it really kind of get scared for the system because of our educational state,
Mm,
because people don't do any critical thinking and are not learning from history.
no.
History is super important. It's not a soft thing. And people are not reading their history and they're not reading and they're
Mm-hmm.
not comprehending what they
Yeah.
read. They're being manipulated to understand certain ideas without challenging what they are.
Yeah. To this point, right? We have a education system, right? And who's determining what we're learning, right? So I think part one is that we're learning whatever our teachers are telling us, right? There's so much history that's not in books, right? There's so much history that like has just been passed down, right?
Mhm,
My grandparents, both of them were part of the Great Migration. My grandmother
mhm.
came from Alabama, my grandfather came from Louisiana. And so I'm like second generation,
Yeah.
Chicagoan. But there's stories and things that been
Oral
passed that
history.
I know, right?
Oral history, yeah.
Um,
Like
like
Native
there's
Americans, like
right,
indigenous, they do that.
exactly. And so like there's that. And then also to your other point is like questioning, asking questions, and then seeking your own education, right? Because I went to a great high school, I went to art college, and like I know things, yes, but also there's a hell of a lot of things that I've learned as an adult that has
Yes.
happened in this country on this planet that was not in my history books,
It's not in there.
not in
I
my
mean, well,
sociology class.
I had to take some courses. I had a professor from the University of Chicago. I went to Bowdoin in
Mhm,
Maine, and it was a black professor from the University of Chicago, and he taught me all about, you know, SNCC, and he taught me
yes,
about the Panthers and taught me
mhm,
about, like, Dr. King's
mhm,
deeper speeches, like the ones about the economy, the ones
mhm,
about the Vietnam War, the ones that they don't show you.
yeah,
Right? And when you start seeing that stuff, right, you start learning about the Tulsa riot,
yes,
you start learning about, like,
yeah,
indigenous people, like, I love live in the Northeast, and you learn about, like, Chicopee and Agawam, all
mhm,
these areas in Western Mass, and these, just basically, it's obliteration of indigenous culture, right?
mhm, yeah,
Smallpox and blankets at massive
yeah,
scale,
yeah,
of, like, people not wanting to tell those stories, and then find historians, they would go on PBS and see a story about it.
yeah. I mean,
You go to the library, you go find a book about it, but it's not
mhm,
somebody anybody wants to push
yeah.
because it's not something they want to really they're maybe not proud of it or they wanna hide
Yeah,
it.
I remember so of course, growing up here, I was well aware of the story of Emmett Till. Um,
Mhm.
the church I grew up in, my pastor, he used to speak about when he was a kid, he went to the service.
You went to
Um,
a service? Oh, wow, yeah.
though when I went to, I lived in Vegas for a bit for college, and no one ever heard of him. I remember living in Atlanta and nobody ever heard of him.
They lost it?
Right?
They lost the whole story?
They no one knew who Emmett Till was. And so like coming from Chicago and being like,
How could they not know?
we know his story. We know the injustice, and
Yeah,
um
there's a reason for that, though.
there's a reason, right? So like going to the point of like, yes, we get education and that education is valid. There's value there, and there's value in other types of education, the oral education and history we get from our family, our ancestors,
Grandparents, yeah.
and then just doing your own research, right? Like again, everything is made up.
Yeah,
And
well, the thing is,
so
like, people have to find coaches, right, to find direction because a lot of times we're given these, like, mixed signals
yeah,
about, like, what to do in life, right? And
yeah,
if at some point you people have their crucible moment and they realize, like, I am not self-actualizing, I am not really being who I am in the mirror.
yeah.
And
I
then they
mean,
need people who are going to not, like, throw water on that and put shade on that. They need people who are gonna help people actually,
mhm.
find their tribe, find their purpose, find their place.
Absolutely. So, like for me as a coach, a big piece of my philosophy is that everyone already have everything within them to thrive in life, right? And part of that is self-awareness, it's self-trust. As a coach, I ask open-ended questions to help my clients figure out what their next steps are. So, I like to use the example of like, maybe you're trying to get a job or something like that. You're telling maybe your partner, your friends, your parents, whoever, and they're like, "Oh, well, how about you just go and apply to here? They're hiring." But they don't really know one what work you're even looking for. Have you ever got like hey, this job is hiring and it's like kind of in your field, but it's not anything close to what you do. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
the only person who have your lived experience is you. The only person who has my clients, which whoever's lived experience is them. And so I believe, say, in you, your knowledge of yourself, right? And so all I do is ask questions. So maybe a goal might be, hey, I really want to, find time every day to walk. So I start asking questions like, okay, what does your schedule look like now? What are pockets in your schedule that, allows you for that? What does a perfect, walk, or what does a perfect environment looks like, that will enable you to go out and go on a walk? And then we start teasing and teasing and teasing. And all of your answers are based off of your experience, right? So again, my philosophy is that you already know, you already have everything you need. It's just my job to listen to you, to validate you, to hold you accountable, and to kind of tease out what works best for you. And that can be confidence coaching. That can be, I do a lot of change and transitional coaching. But yeah, like people, and this is part of the reason why not only I do this work, but I do it for my community, because most people who hear about coaches, it's through like an executive leadership lens. And I
Yeah,
think there's anything wrong with that, but who's on the top
yeah,
of these corporations, right?
yeah. It's
And
always
then
certain people.
exactly, and then the people who are aware of coaching, they might get a life coach because they are moving through something, and that's great. But like BIPOC people, queer folks, black people, straight people, whatever the case is, but like we don't even know we have this access to
Hmm.
someone who can help us just move further in life. I know people who's been wanting to do the same thing for 10 years and finally was like, oh, wait, I'm in control of my life. I I could do it.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes,
Permission structure. Well, you got to give people that permission structure because a
yeah,
lot of times, like the society's got these built-in ceilings,
yeah,
and you're kind of, that people get the imposter syndrome and they feel like they can't
mhm,
do it and they
yeah,
better get pushed down. And you really, it's like it's all there. It's like your brain, you only use like 10% of your brain,
mhm,
and you're probably not even using all your capacity. There's a lot of stuff you've been kind of disincentivized
mhm,
to not be you. You've
absolutely.
been told to just be, you know
Just be easy.
yeah, like the melting pot. What is the
Yeah,
melting pot? The
yeah,
melting pot suggests that you should just everything that's individual
assimilate.
about you should just get just melted away.
Mhm, mhm. I remember when I was younger, I mean, maybe you could tell if I was the kid who was like, that doesn't make sense, why? Or whatever the case may be, but or just very defiant and being like, I am who I am, and people are gonna love it or not, right?
Mhm.
And I remember being maybe in my early 20s looking for a job, and my mom would just be like, oh, how about you just go back to this retail job? Or how about you don't make a fuss, just be easy. How
Just
about
be
you
easy.
dress in a way that's more comfortable for people so that you can get a job, right? And not really, and I understand that like my mom's generation especially grew up in a way that they were like, get a good job, sit in there for 30, 40 years, retire with a great pension. Like
Yeah.
my generation, or me, I'll speak for myself. I'm like, I want to have joy. I want to have fulfillment. And if that means me suffering a little bit or
Yeah,
for
it's a
a
little
while
more yeah,
there,
it's like it's you're pushing it on the envelope where I think
mm-hmm,
our other generation was just so they wanted to get their foot in the door of this structure, but the
mm-hmm.
structure was really the other person's structure,
Yeah, and
right? And we were kind of
there's
told to like the
mhm,
majority structure when
yeah,
it's like, really, were we really ever really gonna be part of that?
mhm,
Should we be more in line with who we really are? And then if you have joy, like you're saying, if you actually can be happy with what you're doing majority of the time instead of just being in
mhm,
the box to make the
the
minimum to pay the mortgage,
mhm.
like maybe that you have a more satisfying life.
Yeah, and I think that people don't realize that they can, or it seems hard, right? Again, to your point of the structures that tell us we can't, right? And respect to my parents and the generations before me, my ancestors, because I do believe that I stand on the shoulders of every black person who's ever had their feet in the soil of this land. I know that, right? So
Mhm.
as I do state that like my parents had to just find a good job, like that was the opportunity, and that's what was thought to be what they should do. And like I am of the mind of like, I look, my mom used to say to me when I was a kid, you came into this world alone and you're going to leave alone. And something that I took away from that was, oh, so all of my happiness and joy depends on me.
Yeah, that's a
What
good
do
way to
I
look at
need
it.
to do to get there? Right? What do I need to do And then I started seeing these imaginary ceilings. I'm like, who
What's
made
that?
that up?
Who did that? Like you can just break through it because like a lot of times it's like my pop stayed in the same job for 25 years.
Hmm.
I've had like I don't know 10 employers. You
Hmm.
know, it's like my generation is like we decided to buck.
Yeah.
But, if I look at my uncle, my pop,
Hmm.
everybody like his brothers, they all stayed in jobs like 20, 25, 30 years. That
Yeah.
was the thing. But the
Hmm.
world has changed that you can't even do that. Right? The Cobra, you could try to
True.
do that and you get laid off.
That's
Like
true.
so you what is better to do is like align to where you actually fit in the
Yeah.
world, right? Then
Yeah.
and that might be a hard thing because it's hard to find out where your tribe is, like where where you can resonate, where
Hmm.
you can actually have a difference. Like if you're in a meeting and every time you put up an idea, they say they never take your idea. Like, well, baby, you're not aligned.
Yeah.
You need to go into the meeting where if you say an idea, it gets put up on the chalkboard, gets sent down to, and it actually
Mhm.
gets developed and you move up the ranks, then you know you're in the right place.
Yes.
If you're
I
not, if you can't have any effect,
Mhm.
what is it?
Yeah, I mean, it makes me think of my background. It's so interesting when I think about it this way, but I went into school for graphic design. So my background is in graphic design, media marketing, all of that. And one of biggest, the most valuable tools that I took away from that experience was the power of critiquing artwork because it makes you better, right?
Mhm,
And so even just thinking about one, any movement, there needs to be different ideas. There needs to be value of everyone's ideas. And then we can look at it and we can say, hey, how about we do this instead of this? How about we, whatever the case may be, but critiquing and one valuing ideas and then coming together to look at those ideas and push them forward, like can change things. So I'm thinking, especially around like protests or people who do a lot of social justice work, right? It's not just the people protesting on the lines, right? We have policy people, right? We have
mhm.
people who is at the protest with water and snacks, right? We
Yeah,
have attorneys, we have people in our Senate, right? It's
people who can
more
actually
than
affect
just
change. Yeah,
it's more than just one person. We all have a
team.
place in
Yeah.
everything that's happening here.
Well, yeah, it's a team kind of thing. It's like as a musician, like you got the whole band.
Yeah,
You can have a top-down band leader, and then nobody really likes being in the band.
yeah,
Right, because like if you don't take like if you never listen to a bass player and you just tell him what to play,
yeah.
eventually he's probably gonna leave because he's getting tired of it, right? Because like
Hmm.
you want to feel that your input is valued.
Absolutely,
You want to
absolutely.
feel that it's actually got something to say. And if like you can I'm on a sports team, it's like if you get a guy that never gets to get off the bench,
Yeah.
he never gets to
Wow.
actually be on the field. Eventually he's
Hmm.
gonna say, "Well, this ain't the right team."
Yeah,
Yeah, because
that's
that
true.
ain't working.
That's true. And again, I think the bigger conversation at least that I'm feeling is just that like we need to empower people and encourage people and validate them and celebrate them, right? Like as a coach, those are the four things I make sure I'm always doing. And not because it's a checkbox, but because
Yeah,
I believe in the individual I'm speaking to, right? I believe, say, in you, right? And doing those things, to your point, if I'm not getting the validation at work, if I'm not, if I see the ceiling and everyone's saying, yeah, the ceiling's there, you're never gonna get anywhere, you start to believe that, right? Like
yeah.
whole communities see a ceiling and are broken down because what everyone else has told
Yeah.
them or put on them.
Then
um
they just phone it in. Like if you get a whole group think of
yeah,
everybody feeling that they can't do anything, they
yeah,
get stagnation.
yeah,
And human beings aren't built to be in stagnation.
no,
Like we're not built to be that way. Now there might be some folks that want us to be in that
mm-hmm,
situation because it's like advantageous to them.
mm-hmm,
So it really when you get the people who put the spark, when Dr. King was out there doing the spark, there were some reverends that didn't. They said, "Well, you're pushing it."
yeah,
They didn't think he should do
yeah,
what he's doing. There's other ones that like, look, oh, we should do this.
Yeah.
And then you get the regular parishioners that they got out and they marched. They went on the bridge. They went
Mm-hmm.
to here. They went to the lunch counter. They went and did the stuff.
It takes courage.
It
It
takes
takes
it's harder to
courage.
do
Yeah.
that because it's like it's easier to sit there and say, well, we can pray about it, but you can pray, but you also have to act.
Act. Yeah.
And
There's power.
Dr. King wasn't all about just praying. He was about getting out there and doing it. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's the two. It needs you can't have one without the other, but you can't just have one.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And it takes courage for someone like Dr. King, right? It takes courage for someone to just decide to make a life change, whether that's, I know someone who I think at 30 decided to take, I think, the LSAT and go into law school.
Yeah,
That takes courage, right? It takes
that's
courage to say
revolutionary.
that this system is not working for me or for my people, right? Think of Dr. King. Hey, we need I don't know what it is, but we need to
Yeah, do
change some
some
things, right?
reset. Yeah,
There's
reset.
courage for someone to speak out. There's courage that is needed to take action. And even if that's just in your own life, like I do a lot of confidence coaching. You need courage to be like, hey, I am not confident and I need help. And then the courage to actually work on that, because you
Yeah,
could choose not to, right? And it's not necessarily, I don't think, about being complacent. I think it might, to our point, be closer to like, what are the things that this person have been told or this person have taken and held on to that tells them that they're not worthy of X,
yeah.
Y,
Well,
and Z.
sometimes it's safer. It's fear and safety. Like
Mhm.
people are fearful of the thing they haven't done, right? Or
Mhm.
the place where they're like could tread water.
Mhm.
You might drown, right? So
Yeah.
if you do something you're not fully comfortable with, you're not going to be fully competent. The problem with our society, it feels like you can only do something if you're an expert.
Yes.
That's the wrong way to look at it. To me, it's like I am a big believer in the happy accident and the actually doing the work.
Mhm.
And doing
Mhm.
the work means like if I'm a musician, like I might work on a song and have 100 versions of it,
Mhm.
right? And it just keeps on evolving. And
Yeah.
every one of those versions, I'm not gonna say they all terrible. It's like it's a step on the ladder that got me to the final version. I'm not
Absolutely.
gonna minimize every step in that ladder. And people minimize their
Yeah.
wins. You can have a little win, but if
Mhm.
you look at it always as a loss,
Yeah.
then you get discouraged and you don't move forward.
Yeah, I think that something that is very apparent to me is that people see themselves through a different lens than they see other people. One of my favorite things to do with a client who might be not really showing up for themselves. So something I might do is for my clients, I always write up notes of the session. I send it to them afterwards. And
Mhm.
the great thing about that is that I have all these quotes that someone's saying. And so what I'll say is I'll say, hey, I'm going to read a few things back to you and you let me know what you're hearing. Because if I'm saying to you, I really want to show up for myself more. Oh, but I put my needs aside to do this. I put my needs aside to do that. And maybe as I'm speaking it, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but then to hear someone else repeat those same words to you, you hear it differently.
Yeah.
And then you're like, "Oh, wait, I'm not putting myself first. What
Yeah.
do I need to do
There's
to
yeah.
change?" And then
Yeah.
I ask my client, "Okay, so what do you need to do to change?" Right? We're in our head, right? We're
Yeah.
so in our body and in this almost
Tunnel
blind
vision. You
thing,
get the tunnel vision.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like sometimes you just need someone to say exactly what you said back to you.
Yeah. Because sometimes you don't that people don't talk about listening skills. And I
Mhm.
always tell them that you don't even hear yourself.
No,
Like some
no.
people, like they might think they're so it's like the problem is like musicians run into this where they'll have one of the best songs they've ever written, but
Mm,
because they're so close to it, they say, this is terrible. Right,
mhm,
and they
mhm,
have to be nodded and pushed by people around them to
mhm.
actually put it in the world, because most of the time they won't,
Yeah.
and you have to get prodded because you don't actually hear it the way other people hear it, and until somebody tells you that it's good, you think it's
Mhm.
terrible.
Yeah. The
So
power
like,
of celebration. The
yeah,
power of celebration.
yeah, and that's a hard thing because something you need to celebrate the wins in your life, and you
Yeah.
need to look at the little wins you can have in a day,
Yeah.
right? That you got
Absolutely.
up on time, that you actually did, you know, part of the work, and
Mhm.
just because you didn't finish all the work doesn't mean it's like, well, at least, if you just beat yourself up all day,
Mhm. Mhm.
then you just it's like, well, you don't need your boss to beat you up. You've been beating yourself
You've
up.
been doing it yourself, exactly. Yeah, it's and I think also as for myself, right? Like I founded a company a few years ago that was really successful. That also was in support of BIPOC queer folks, and sometimes people be like, "Oh my goodness, Zipporah, you did this," and I'm like, "Oh yeah, it was cool. I did this thing," and then my close people in my life would be like, "But Zipporah, do you see how the large impact that that company had on the world, right?" And it's
Mhm.
like, oh yeah, I did do that. And so it's again so good. It's important to have the trusted people, the
Yeah,
people who
perspective.
actually see you, who
Yeah.
celebrate you, to reflect back to you, hey, what you did is not a small task, right? And as a
Mm.
coach, that's what I do. I am looking and hearing everything you're saying. I'm writing it down. I am highlighting. I am saying, "Hey, did you notice that you did this thing that you couldn't imagine even attempting, or you attempted this thing that you were terrified to even try?"
Yeah.
That's big. What does that feel like to like push through that barrier, right? And then people are like, "Oh, I did something. You're right."
Mhm.
I'm like, all right, let's clap it up. You did that,
Yeah,
you
well, that's
know?
like a lesson learned. The big lessons learned in life are that you have to appreciate, like, moments in your life, and not be like into just resentments and hold on to past
Mhm,
mistakes. Like, if you take something and you learn from it, and
mhm,
you move to the next phase, and
mhm,
you have things that happen that were maybe tragedies or bad things happen, but if you are able to process
mhm. Yeah.
and then you can take, as an artist, we take a lot of the bad things
Mhm.
and we turn them into art,
Yeah.
right? And so we learn how to kind of be the catharsis of the art process is like
Mhm.
a therapy. It's therapeutic.
Yeah.
And that's why I think a lot of therapists will go into use art therapy, whether or not you can paint or knit or whatever,
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
kind of get people to take what's inside and express it and give themselves a way to process
That's it.
the
Yeah.
feelings
Yeah.
and get their arms around their feelings.
Absolutely.
Because people are told to like suck it up,
Yeah. I
but
mean,
sucking it up doesn't work.
it doesn't. It doesn't, right? Because we've seen what that looks like, you know, in our loved ones, our family members, our ancestors. What does that, what has that done? What impact has that shared through, like, just in a family space? I like your point to, like, speaking about the process, because as a coach, some a lot of people don't know that there's a difference between therapy and coaching, right? And so
Mhm.
sometimes I'll get people in who's like, I don't have a therapist, but I just figured this could work. And it's like, no, you gotta work through your past. You gotta work through and process the harm, the hurt, the different things, because you can't move forward. Again, what I was saying earlier is that we're often in our own way. You
Mhm.
can't move forward if you're looking back.
Yeah,
You just
you're the biggest person in your way. You're like a glass ceiling, as
mm,
you're putting the ceiling. You're the one to put it there.
yeah. And sometimes, I think everyone has experiences trying to do the same thing over and over and just failing. And it's like, okay, well, there's a reason, right? And that reason can be vast. There can be a lot of different reasons why it is that, but whether you need to reflect and look back and move through some things, maybe there's something completely out of your control, right? But processing your past is only going to make moving forward easier.
Yeah, and that's it's a hard truth because people don't like to deal with the things that make them frustrated.
Yeah.
that make them feel bad. People tend to want to go and get the sugar pill.
Yeah, or they don't have the tools to even receive it,
Yeah,
right? So it's
yeah,
like, ooh, I'm defensive and deflecting, but really, I don't even know how to listen,
yeah,
right? What do I need to do to learn how to listen? What do I need to do to learn how to communicate? Um, Again, a lot of it's self-worth or self-work. Something that I like to remind myself and I like
yeah,
to remind my
yeah,
clients is that this is my first time on this day at this age. I am forever learning. Someone
yeah.
who's
Never
80,
done.
it
Never.
is their first time at 80 doing whatever they're doing. We are from our memories, the first time is this experience that we're having now.
Hmm.
Right? So like make a mistake.
Yeah,
Learn.
well, being the president, but I always had this really awesome story with Herbie Hancock and Miles Davis.
Mm-hmm.
Herbie Hancock was playing with Davis, and he was playing a chord that wasn't right for the song. He missed the note. He
Mm-hmm.
thought Miles was going to kill him.
Mm-hmm.
Miles actually heard that note and changed his playing to match what Herbie played.
Mm-hmm.
And then later told him, it's like, man, you don't need to beat yourself up because like this is fusion jazz. We're going to evolve the song. There's nothing wrong with being in the moment. That's what
Yeah,
it is.
yeah,
And then
yeah.
Herbie's changed his whole mindset in terms of instead of trying to practice to hit every note the way it was arranged,
Yeah.
he said, I'm going to actually play what the feeling is in that moment.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
it's revolutionary when you give yourself permission to do that in
Exactly.
life. You can open up a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I it's so funny that you mentioned that. So I the last 2 years have been learning how to play the drums. I've always wanted to learn how to play an instrument. And I a few months ago switched instructors. I felt like I was really stagnant with that instructor. I'm like, I'm paying this money. I need to, get to where I want to be. And something that I feel like is really powerful. And this is almost exactly what you're saying. My instructor now has taught me how, yes, to play, maybe the basic groove of the song, but to learn what the essence is. So that, like,
Mhm.
okay, say I missed the 16th note or I missed something on the snare, I can still keep the
Recover. Yeah, you
essence,
can still
the
go.
ambiance of it versus just being like one and two and three and four and one. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, it's if
it's
you
like,
listen to the great Motown drummers, they're not totally in time, right?
no.
They're actually taking advantage of the fills and micro timing a little off, but it's like it is kind of like a painter that
Mhm.
puts something down. It's like in that moment, once you put it down, it's down.
Yeah,
You
it
have to
is.
kind of understand it's like that paintbrush, it's like a sound painting. Once it's down, it's down. If you keep
Exactly.
on obsessing about what you just put down, you
Mhm.
can't be where you need to be.
The
Like,
power of letting go,
yeah.
right? The power of just saying what is has been and what can I do in my future to just to meet myself where I want to be, right?
Mhm.
Whether that's playing an instrument. Again, like I said, I'm 2 years in. I am learning a lot. Am
Yeah.
I there? I'm getting there. You know what I mean?
You're always gonna get there.
I'm always getting there, and that's true for life. I love this visual of painting. You what you put down. I draw portraits in pen. I do stippling.
Awesome.
And so something that I've had to grasp is, hey, okay, now you see that that nose is a little off. What can I do to get it back to where it needs to be? Right? We are
Yeah.
always shaping and molding in our life, right? There's always opportunity.
There's just an opportunity to evolve yourself, right? So
Mhm,
you don't be scared of the little mistakes you can make
mhm,
because,
mhm.
the world will forgive you if you're willing to kind of just be in the moment and be in that flow state.
Yeah,
It's like what is bad is if you give up on yourself
yeah,
because you
yeah,
say, well, you can't get it. It's like, well, you maybe you can't get what you were trying to do the last 5 seconds ago, but
mhm,
you're gonna get what's coming.
yeah,
You're gonna get into it, and it's evolution, and it's like it's not supposed to be perfect.
yeah. I mean, this makes me think of and when I was in third grade, my favorite teacher I've ever had, her name is Miss Kelly. And in third grade, Aaliyah's "If at First You Don't Succeed, Dust Yourself
Mhm.
Off and Try Again." That was the anthem for my third grade class. And as I'll be 34 soon. I still think about, okay, I didn't do it. I didn't do what I thought I was going to do, but I know what I have in me, and I
Mhm.
know what I can do. And so let me just go ahead, dust it off, and let's
Yep.
go again. I do that when I'm working on a fill right now for maps for the yeahs,
Mhm. Yeah.
and I'm gonna keep trying, right? If
Yeah.
that's my business or my personal life, at the end of the day, it's me, and I'm in charge of my destiny, my journey, my happiness, and I'm also an action-based person, if you cannot tell. So
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
always trying to figure out what do I need to get to where I want to be.
I think it's cool that you pay that forward with the people you work with, into the community.
Mhm.
And community, really, we have to really dive into our own resources, which are other people.
Yeah.
Like if you try to be out there being an island, you're gonna have problems. It's like
Yeah.
people are gonna have to lean into each other in these times.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like we've always had to deal with hard times in the US. Yeah, the African American experience has always been a hard time.
Yeah.
But it's not that we didn't have good times. We invented jazz, we
Oh,
invented
absolutely.
bebop, we invented hip hop, we
Yes.
invented all these things. And in the middle of all those things, right, things were bad will happen,
Hmm.
right? But we've always been able to take whatever they gave us, right, and turn it into lemonade,
Beauty. Yes. Yes.
turn it into champagne. He's like we've been able to do it. So and I
Even
don't
the
think
power of
we're gonna continue to do it.
even just the power of laughter, right? Like there's so much laughter and joy that also lived in those times and live today, right? I meet with my best friend every Wednesday night to hang out, and we did a toast, and our toast was laughing and having joy even now.
Mhm.
That's a choice.
The choice. Yeah, we can get through the hard times and we can make better times because we can actually, lean into ourselves and
Hmm.
lean into our communities and build ourselves up. And it's like, if you don't want us, then we want ourselves,
Yeah, always.
and we will get where we need to be ourselves. If you want
Hmm.
to join us, fine. I'm not saying you
Yes.
can't, but
Yes.
if you don't want to deal with it, like we'll deal with
Exactly.
it.
Exactly. Yes, I feel like Black people, especially Black people, are the most welcoming people,
Yeah.
right? Like people, I've seen Black people have like a little white kid in their family, and they'd be like, "Go off, Jimmy." Like I think we have a love for life and for people. And so yes, even in the midst of struggle or trials and tribulations, there's joy, there's laughter, there's art, there's creativity. Um, and though we are always in a place where we have to look back, we're always hopeful, and moving forward and trying to find joy and get into, a place that is better. Again, I stand on the shoulders of my ancestors. I know there are people climbing up my back right now, getting ready to stand on my shoulders. And
Well,
that's the
there's a
beauty.
lot of work to do for our BIPOC brothers and sisters because we really are feeling the weight of some people trying to just erase us. But you say you can't. You can go to a website and get rid of somebody's
Yeah.
acronym, right,
Mhm.
on the website,
But we're still here.
but you're still here, right? So you
Yeah.
can't. You're not going to get rid of us because you want to wipe the website clean. Like
Mhm.
that doesn't work. It's
We
like
still exist.
we're gonna get through that.
We've always been here, and we've always pushed through. And at the end of the day, we've made a lot of change happen, and that doesn't stop today. That
Mhm.
didn't start on January 20th. We will continue to
Yeah,
move forward.
yeah. Time is relative. We're gonna push it.
Yes.
We're gonna get through that. But I want to thank you for being on the show. It
Yeah.
always goes by quicker than we ever imagined. But we
Right.
got your website again, www.withinmecoaching.com. People go there. What do they find? Can they book sessions with you?
Yep. Yep. So they will. First off, thank you for having me. This has been a lovely chat. Yes, if you go to withinmecoaching.com, you can schedule a free 30-minute discovery call. You can learn a little bit more about me, my philosophy, the work I do. And yeah, even my pricing plans are on there, which are accessible. I work primarily with BIPOC and queer folks. So yeah, I look forward to meeting new people through them clicking and getting their discovery calls. But yeah, they can go there or they can go on my Instagram, which is also Within Me Coaching.
That's awesome. Now, I want to let people know that's fully clickable on all the podcast platforms that we're on. Right now, we've been on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. In the podcast description, that URL is fully clickable and you'll be able to go right to it. We will be on all the other podcast platforms where you can listen to or watch a podcast by later today. I want to thank you for being on the show today. And I encourage people to go and click the link and to dive deeper into what we've been talking about today. But I want to thank you for being on the show on a Saturday. And
Yeah,
hope you have a great rest of your day and weekend.
awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.